Hello, Beaver Fellows! Today we'll get to know what types of wood are there and how they perform. There are three types of wood: conifers, scatter-vascular and ring-vascular. Let's talk about the properties of conifers. Each of the coniferous trees is characterized by this vein structure: soft, hard, soft, hard. As a rule, more golden ones are hard. The following dispersed vascular. They are usually fruit trees: elder, cherry, maple, birch, linden, apple, dogwood, and plum. The peculiarities of the tree structure are: you don't see the vessels. There are no pores in the wood. And the third type is ring vascular. They have clearly defined vessels. Acacia, ash, walnut has weak, scattered vessels and almost invisible, but nevertheless they are present and create a unique pattern. But they are not noticeable during the actual carving. And another example, rosewood. As a rule, all exotic wood types are scattered vascular. Now let's move on to the peculiarities of carving. We'll start with the scatter vascular group. In this group you can divide the wood species into soft and hard. Soft species include elder, linden. Conventional hardwoods include birch, cherry. Hardwood types are all fruit types of trees, like maple, apple, plum, and dogwood is the hardest of what we have. Now the peculiarities of the carving. I want to point out right away that the density of the wood matters when you're sharpening your tool. The softer the wood, the softer the sharpening has to be. The harder the wood, the blunter the sharpening needed. Let's start with the conifers. Take the yew, for example. The peculiarity of conifers is that the white, light-colored fibers are softer compared to the thin ones. So your tool has to be very well controlled, because on this wood the tool cuts very intermittently. You can even hear it when carving. So when you cut conifers, the tool very often slips, or there is microfracture of the cutting edge at a sharp sharpening angle. How do you check this? You can see it very well on a linden. Now my chisel is sharpened for linden. And here we see, in this case, the cutting edge has not crumbled. On soft rocks, it is visible by the characteristic stripes when carving. To summarize, when carving softwoods, you need to have a tight tool control and smooth movements to avoid chipping of the cutting edge. It is true for any tool. And you should always keep in mind that conifers are quite prickly. Here, the wood is chipped. If you don't want to chip, cut in two directions. For example, if we have to cut along this line, we can't do it like we do with softwood, because we'll get a splinter. So, to avoid a splinter, I suggest cutting in both directions. And what's your favorite type of wood? Comment below. And also, as a characteristic of conifers, it's a lot of knots. Now let's take a linden. Draw lines with a pencil and see how it cuts. We see that in our case there is a knot. The knot in linden is predictable. It goes along the cut line. Elder is also a softwood, but it's got the characteristic of a distinct direction of grain. So it's more prickly, as you can see. You have to make a small cuts, slowly, to avoid big splinters. If we have to make a cut like this, we have to do it on both sides. In many types of wood, you can see the direction of the fibers. The intermediate type between soft and hardwoods, I would say cherry and birch. In birch, you can also see a clear direction of fibers. The fibers can only be pronounced in the light. When carving, the fibers are not really felt. When carving, it is necessary to apply a medium effort, and the sharpening is suitable for both soft and hardwood. My chisel is sharpened for hardwood. Look how it cuts birch. It cuts well in all directions. The wood has practically no splintering. It's a lot harder to cut on the butt. The fibers are dense. It's quite an interesting wood. You may use it for spoons as well. Next, consider the wood of the cherry tree. The hardness level is similar to the birch. The annual rings are clearly visible, and the vessels are almost invisible. If the tool is well sharpened, there will be a nice shiny cut. The sharpening is suitable for both soft and hardwood. we see that chipping is there, so watch the direction of the fibers. The fibers are straight and don't change direction. Hardwoods are fruit trees: apple, plum, pear. And we can also include maple. Maple is one of the hard enough species. The wood is not particularly prickly. And can be cut in any direction. If you try to cut it by hand, by force, you have to put a lot of efforts. But it has good bending properties. It can be used for making kitchen knives and small toys. One of the hardest types of fruit wood will be plum. The wood is very hard to cut. The colors range from pale pink to bright, almost purple color. And the sharpening of the tool should be the same as for hardwood. We see that the cut is clean and shiny. The sharpening is for hardwood. Apple tree is a little softer than a plum. It cuts in any direction. Not prone to chipping. Now let's look at dogwood. This type of wood is very hard to cut with any tool. It cuts in all directions, and the fibers are very dense. Now let's move on to the ring vessel wood. You can see that the chisel jumps between the vessels. It is advisable to use a blunt sharpening angle for these hard rocks. So that the cutting edge doesn't crumble. It is better to work with an impact tool, like mallet, with this type of wood, to better control the cut. The second hardest I would call oak, because of the location of the fibers. It is very common for the hand to fly off when carving, so you got to be very careful. I would put acacia in third place for hardness. The cut is clean. This chisel is sharpened for softwood. It will cut acacia, but then we will see where it leads on linden. The hardest wood I would call ash. It's hard to cut. It takes a lot of effort. You can already see the micro damage on the chisel. Now let's go back to linden. The sharpening of this chisel was for softwood. See, there's no smooth cut anymore. there's a micro stripe in the center, because the sharpening was for softwood. This all can be fixed quite easily. You just take a couple of minutes on the sling. Look, a completely different cut. Now let's take a chisel that's been sharpened for hardwood. We see that there are no scratches. So the conclusion: each type of wood requires a different type of sharpening. Hope it was helpful. Have fun carving, folks!